And we are live. Have been actually for a minute. There we go. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions, the podcast in search of a more palatable political ferment. You're having a hangout, trying some new different things. We're back using YouTube, and we're just going to hang out, talk about a few different things, and just kind of check in with people because it's been a while since we had one, that worked.
In a minute.
Because the last one of these we did, it didn't work out so well due to technical issues. But we're back. A couple things that we want to talk about. I guess maybe one of the bigger topics was actually that was in an Atlantic article that you'd shared, Haley.
Oh yeah.
That was a pretty interesting read. That's in relation to, and I can't remember the author's name, but it was an article about the chilling effect on free speech by the presence of firearms at public protests. And I thought that was a pretty interesting topic. Of course, there's lots of other things going on, lots of petty Facebook squabbles. Another thing I wanted to touch on at one point in this conversation is whether or not Joe Biden is really responsible for the gas prices, because I don't think he is, and I would really like a better explanation as to why a lot of people think that he is. They just say it, like, if you voted for Biden, you owe me gas money, like that kind of thing. Like, okay, explain why. And that never seemed to be forthcoming, and also doesn't seem to be how supply and demand works. But that's just my little hot take of the hot take. But anyway,
it's just the quarterback syndrome.
The quarterback syndrome. Explain that, because I don't know sports ball.
As in, when a team is successful, they say it's the quarterback's success. When the team is horrible, they say it's the quarterback's fault, regardless of whether or not the quarterback scored 45 points in the game and the defense gives up 60. They still say it's the quarterback's fault.
I see. So, and it's in this sense, and I say this, and it's very important to some people about consistency, and I want to be consistent about this. When you're in charge, everything's your fault, right? You kind of get blamed regardless of whether or not you really had anything to do with it. That's just how the ball bounces. But there's kind of a gap between everything's your fault and you did something specifically to make this bad, and I'm holding you accountable for it. And I don't think there's an argument there. Haley, you got any thoughts you want to contribute to that, or?
No, nothing. I was just thinking about how a couple of things. After Hurricane Katrina, gas prices skyrocketed. It was almost $4 a gallon, and so that was in 2005 for a little while. And then also in late 2008. So that was during. So then that was whenever George W. was still in office. That was whenever Obama and when Romney. Obama was going against McCain, right, in 2008. I don't remember who.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. But so both of those, that was George W. both of those times. But I don't recall that people blaming the president those times. But I have noticed that this time, it's inundated with criticism. Like, there is a sticker that is being placed of Joe Biden. I think he's. I'm in the deep South oil land, South Texas right now, and there is a billboard about gas prices, and it has Sleepy Joe in a what looks like the background look like a screen grab from Top Gun. So he's sitting in a Top Gun fighter, and he's licking ice cream.
Yeah, it's always the thing with him and the ice cream. It's just.
What is it, the ice cream thing?
As if no one else does the ice cream thing.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get it.
And it's thanks. I don't know.
If you think back, they blamed Jimmy Carter for the gas price that was OPEC trying to flex its nuts. They blamed Obama when the prices first went well over $2 and never came back, kind of point. So
in 2008, it was almost $4. It was $4. So.
No, I'm saying that's when it went from
2008.
186 to we will never be below $2 during that time. It has never really gone down below that. So it always seems to be more intentionally said that it's the president's fault when it's a Democrat in, regardless of whether or not an increase happens when a Republican's in.
Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
I think
that's just
that's
yeah.
mainly
Go ahead.
just the blame. Right now, they're throwing it hard on Biden just because they're like, see, it's because he wants to go to renewables. That's why the gas price is higher. Like, that's not really how that worked.
Well,
Okay.
the reason for that is because the right wing has been since the '80s building a media empire, and so when the right wing has a talking point, it gets out, and when that talking point gets out, people start talking about it. When people start talking about something, that becomes news. And so now, regardless of the fact that the president has very little control over day-to-day gas prices, the idea that Biden might be at fault for higher gas prices becomes a story. And the
What's mimetic?
whether you want to, the mainstream media, however you want to define that, they are going to report on the fact that people are talking about these things, but people aren't actually talking about them. It's just the right-wing media machine ginning up controversy. So yeah, there's no action by Biden that should have made gas prices go up. This is all a natural elasticity from the pandemic. Gas prices were super low because there was no demand for gas.
Well, it's the pandemic plus like the natural disasters in the Gulf Coast.
Oh yeah, no, and yeah, there are acute problems there, absolutely. But the general state of things is that during the pandemic there was very low demand, and the oil producing nations, because there was low demand, slowed down the supply. That's very basic economics. Now that demand is going up again, supply hasn't met that demand, and therefore the commodity has a higher price.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty simple.
Supply chain issues everywhere. It's not like
it's not as if OPEC is, producing at maximum capacity and everywhere in the world is able to accept oil at a perfect rate. Like, that's not happening. So
it still need to be refined.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and there are a lot of steps in there, sure. Yeah. But I mean, if you look at it from the very macro, like the 30,000 foot look, all that we're seeing is higher demand than there is supply. Like it's a basic graph. The price is going to go up. They can charge more. People are going to pay it. A year and a half ago, when nobody was driving, when we had basically full, almost complete societal shutdown, gas went down well below $2, and that's because there was more supply out there.
There was just demand. Incredibly low demand. Yeah, I mean, working all through, I guess, the worst parts of the shutdown, still going to work every day, just noticing how much less traffic there was. Obviously, much less gas was being consumed. That's just simple math, right?
Yeah, and I remember last August was the first August of 2020 was the first time that I stopped on the way home from work on the highway since March, or late March.
I mean, stop due to traffic, and stop and go. Okay.
Right, and I get stopped on the highway, I'm sitting on a freeway, and I'm not moving at all every day. And there were several months there where that simply didn't happen. So, like I said, it's just a way of producing controversy, and because America is such a large nation with people who are generally flexible in terms of living situation, in terms of you don't live walking distance from work or biking distance from work, everybody needs gas. Gas prices go up, everybody feels that, and you have a controversy right there. So report on it.
Yeah, and that's sort of been my assessment of it as well. And it's just more bad faith polemics. And the part I have trouble with it is, we can sit here in this group and have, an even toned conversation about, well, how that's really not true, doing the Ben Shapiro facts and statistics man kind of thing. Like, this is just how it's working, without, raising voices about it. It's so hard to even try and start and have a conversation.
Well, yeah,
with
but David, hypothetically, if we said that gas prices were higher and then they could go lower, you understand that, right? You understand, you would agree.
By the way, this is all to tease that RJ and I are probably gonna do a short at some point on why Ben Shapiro is an idiot's vision of a smart person. That we're gonna do that. I don't know do we want to combine that with Jordan Peterson, because I know you have these
I think so.
two wildly
Why would you
successful
not?
Facebook groups, but because there's separate individuals, do a cut on one. You
Two
can do
sides
both
of
at
the
the
same
same time.
coin.
It's yeah.
Yeah, but I limited it to those two because
You
people
keep
were like,
going.
"Oh, why don't you do Tucker Carlson?" And I'm like, "Well,
Why don't you do Joe Rogan?
yeah,
Yeah.
because they're just idiots, right?"
I saw
but-
the funniest meme today.
It's so easy though, because it's really Ben Shapiro is just that kid that read the big words before you learned the big words, so therefore made you feel like you were smart.
Yeah.
He says words I have to look up, and
Well,
he
yeah,
says
but-
it so
He just
confidently.
talks fast. That's
He
it.
And he
does.
says
He
it
don't-
so confidently, and I have to think about my thoughts. He doesn't have to think about it; it just comes off his top of his head.
Yeah.
Well,
If
yeah,
you
and
ever
he
hear
talks-
him, if you ever
he
hear
talks
him
fast.
talk slowed down,
That is a
Yeah.
great TikTok.
I mean, he sounds like a drunk frat guy, just like. And then women aren't women. You can't call a woman. It's like you're just like, oh my god, this is like what convinces people, and it's just because he delivers it quickly and confidently.
Yeah.
Yes, because he's rehearsed the things that
Yeah.
the Koch brothers told him to say.
Well, that
He's
and he's
rehearsed, he's
also
polished,
he's on
yeah.
message, right?
Yeah.
There's a message there, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, the right wing outrage machine.
Yeah.
Like they're very good at grifting off of the very people that they've trained not to think and not to understand anything and to distrust true
Anybody who does
expertise.
think.
Right, but to distrust true expertise.
Yeah.
Why should I believe that a vaccine is effective when my neighbor said that it's not and it's going to kill people?
Yeah.
Here's a
And none of
question to
them
you
will
guys.
admit
Go
that
ahead.
they got the vaccine.
Here's a question to you guys. It's pretty easy for us to point out, people like, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Dinesh D'Souza, like all these people, Jordan B. Peterson, like of these, these grifters, these shills, people like Ted Cruz, who, they know they're full of shit because, you know that they're not individually stupid people, but that's kind of, they're catering to this misinformation crowd kind of thing, and we see how dangerous that's been over the last several years. Can we honestly admit that there's anybody and maybe not as bad, but is maybe doing some of the same things that is on the left, whether you want to call it leftist or liberal or anything else, like in terms of like self-reflection, and self-criticism, being like, wait, are we doing that too? Like, how do we guard against that kind of thing? Or is it really just, a brain disease of the right?
Well, no, it's absolutely there is a push on either side because there are willing recipients to the message. And once you have those willing recipients, now you have consumers. And once you have consumers, now you can make money. Like it's all a big grift.
Yeah, and I would say Anderson Cooper is a nice little example on the other side.
Well, I would say it would be closer to things like Occupy Democrats, things where in every single instance the slant is to the left. It is being delivered to a willing audience that has self-selected, and it wants to hear. It doesn't want to hear this is nuanced and this is difficult. It wants to hear they're evil. They are the party that wants to, make all the billionaires trillionaires and stomp you out. And it's essentially the same thing. It's just not nearly as organized. The right wing has done a much better job of coalescing around its base that it's been
They're
sort of
good at
ginning up
branding.
since
I
1958.
would also
way
say
to
that the
bring it.
right wing has done a lot more of that on the external media, but there's a vast number of people who do that on the regular network version of media that are considered themselves liberal, but are really just corporate.
Could you give me an example? You said Anderson Cooper is like that?
Yeah, prime example. That's a good example. I use Anderson Cooper because of the fact that he hits all of the societal points, like don't hate people for this, don't hate people for that, while still pushing the idea that they're coming to arguments in good faith and nobody's corrupt, which is more of a corporate perspective than it is really a liberal perspective. But your traditional liberal that at least the conservatives think about are basically somebody who is society liberal, but then still thinks like the corporations want them to think.
Interesting. You guys have any thoughts on that or any other examples? Because I sometimes wonder, like, you know, are like the Rachel Maddows of the world, are they, you know, and I wouldn't say just as bad, but also problematic in certain ways. But then, you know, I have to caveat that myself because I don't really watch like Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow.
Here's the thing. In America, anytime that you have news organizations that are catering to the number of views that they get because they're for profit, you're going to have problems. The right, you know, Fox News and everything, they're better at branding and they're all in on the outrage cycle. Any for-profit news media outlet is going to be guilty of the same, you know, because they're for profit. They're trying to get views. They're trying to generate views. And based on the American media consumption culture, it is about generating more outrage to get more views and cycle in more viewers and get more money from your advertisers and everything. So I would say, I mean, I listen to NPR. They're not for profit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, I don't really know if it's like a fair question to be like, is there anyone on the left who, I mean, there's an issue whenever you have for-profit media. Simple as that.
Yeah. I guess I don't know if there's a solution.
Well, no,
go ahead.
I think that what Haley is getting at, and it's an important point, is that if we're, and we have, so when I say if we're, I'm doing the Ben Shapiro, well, hypothetically, it's
say it fast.
If
we'll play it back at 1.5. That's okay.
Right. Yeah. If we're going to give over the news media and no longer throw up walls, because let's say 40 years ago, there were walls between ABC as a corporate empire and ABC as a news organization. Those walls don't exist nearly as much anymore. There still are like journalistic integrity. Those things still exist. Obviously, when they get violated, they're very high-profile stories. But when we give over news media to what Haley exactly described, to the for-profit world, the point is no longer let's get to the truth. Let's report the facts. It's let's report the things that get the people to watch, because the more people that watch, as Haley said, the more money we can charge our advertisers. And that
why do you
becomes
think
the
we
bottom line.
keep seeing like marijuana gummies? Why do you think we keep seeing in Halloween candies? Why do we keep seeing people are planting knives in Halloween candies? Like all of us know stoners aren't putting marijuana gummies in anyone's freaking trick-or-treat bags.
Right,
you know, they're expensive. They're expensive.
I did see a candy bar that had a literal piece of shit in it, though.
Yeah, I saw that.
That was Tucker Carlson, but
I mean, how many news articles have you seen from various news sources since it's been the Halloween season about like check your kids' candy and all of that?
Yeah, no,
right, and they've been, and you commented or shared it earlier, Haley, but a lot of different local police organizations are sharing the check your kids' candy, because there are lots of people making edibles to make them look like, you know, Sour Patch Kids or Oreos. Nobody is intentionally giving away their edibles to kids on their porch. Not happening. Just 0%, because, as Haley pointed out, they're expensive and they get you high. And the person who bought them doesn't want to waste their money accidentally getting some 7-year-old super stoned.
Yeah, it's preposterous. That's not happening.
Yeah.
We know it.
But you got to remember, the whole war on drugs is based off of the idea that anybody does drugs is some kind of evil psychotic person to begin with. So therefore, that's why they would do it.
I'm on drugs right now. This is delicious
Yeah.
bourbon.
It's just legal ones.
Those
Yeah.
are the ones they don't agree to as being drugs,
Right.
whether it's that or a smoke or in a pill form. They're not. Those aren't drugs. Those are
Right. Yeah, it's just
acceptable.
as you said, acceptable. What's considered acceptable by society. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that drives the the Karens, basically the people who get upset over nothing and overreact, which is most of us when it comes to one thing or another. I think a lot of times we can be guilty of that sort of thing. But yeah, and that's the whole thing about news, and to your point, Haley, how it's sensationalized because it's driven by profit, and the thing that's most profitable, as we know from basically the Facebook algorithm, stuff that drives controversy, stuff that drives anger, will produce more engagement, and that sells because that's how it all runs off of the advertising. So the more engagement there is, the more sales. That's how it goes. So they're incentivized to push us to get mad over dumb shit that's not even real or misconstrued wildly, and make us fight with each other. That's where we are. But I don't think it's going to change either.
I want to throw in here real fast. If your kid does accidentally take an edible or I don't know, an opioid,
it's probably a public service.
Yeah, but take him to the hospital, because yesterday in Indiana, where I live, a 3-year-old died of a fentanyl overdose. And
it's not where I was going.
When they interviewed the grandmother was like, "Oh yeah, he found a fentanyl pill and took it, but we thought he was okay." It's like, Jesus.
They didn't take him to the hospital?
No, they didn't. Yeah, I mean, that's what nobody wants kids to get edibles. Nobody's handing out edibles. But if some kid takes an edible or a fentanyl pill, you need to get them checked out. Like, the fact that they seem a little lethargic right now isn't going to get fixed 12 hours from now when they go to sleep. So
yeah,
if you're watching this and that happens, please get your kid checked out.
Yeah. Thank you for that PSA. Now, I was making a joke about like a kid eating like a weed gummy or something like that, and I'll be like, "You're welcome. You've got a very calm child now." Like, but that's obviously not where you were going with that. Anyway, do we want to transition on to that Atlantic article?
Sure.
Haley, you go with that? So I actually looked it up. It's by Diana Palmer and Timothy Zick. And it's Zick. Yeah, that's what it is. Name. Okay. Second Amendment has become a threat to the First. And sort of the cliff notes of this are, they have done studies which are cited in the article showing basically the presence of firearms causing a massive uptick in the incidence of violence and loss of life in public protests versus those where there are no visible firearms present. And it's something like from like one out of 62 versus like 1 out of like 2,000 and something for non-firearm related. And they do small criticism of this is they didn't compare that number to like they said that like the ones where there were firearms present, they compared violence to death of non-firearms, and that's not really a fair comparison because if we're going to compare it's deaths from deaths versus some kind of violence versus some kind of violence, and they mix it up, and I found that to be a little bit misleading. But they go back and they actually earlier in the article they do cite where they're talking about just deaths as where there is that correlation of firearms present, and that was like 1 out of 62, which is half as much as I think the number they were trying to compare it to where there was just violence. But like that's still a huge difference, and maybe they were just trying to expand on that. So just to be trying to be even keel with it.
Nitpicky and obscure.
Yeah, I'm being nitpicky and obscure. I'm sorry. I just want to be accurate with what I'm saying. But it's that's always the fucking problem, isn't it? That like I want to get it right. I want to understand what's true and not propagate something that's false or misleading. And like
but there's the cliff notes of the story
giant sea of like people who just don't care are going to go with whatever hot take. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox about it.
So the hot take is
It has a
whenever
chilling
there's
effect, right, on free
well,
speech.
guns like drastically increase the likeliness of violence
Yeah.
and death at protests.
And so therefore
It-
people are
well,
more
and then
afraid.
yeah, which is fair. And
Yeah.
people, whenever they were asked, you know, like, would you go to a protest? Would you go to a protest if you knew people were going to be openly carrying firearms? A good chunk of them say, no, I don't want to go to. I don't want to go to protests where I know people.
Or I don't
want
to speak up at a protest, and like all kinds of variations.
I don't want to carry a sign, you know, because I'm concerned that I might get shot.
Right.
For being at a protest, because there's like this counter protest culture here that's going on.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I
thought that it was interesting in light of the Kenosha Rittenhouse trial coming up.
Gosh. Oh, we could segue to that at some point. Maybe
I was trying not to tie that in, but I was thinking the same thing, because then if they do get shot, they're not a victim anymore, right?
Yeah, apparently.
They're rioters.
You can't call them. You got to call them, some variety of criminal, and not a person or a victim.
You got to call Rittenhouse a hero.
Yeah, real American hero. Anyway, so I don't know, like, RJ, I don't think you're a gun owner. Haji, I know you are. I am. I mean, what do you think? Because I haven't been to any public protests in the last couple of years, and that's mostly because of the pandemic. But when I've gone to certain things, I've either thought about, or in one case actually carried for protection, and but that was not open carry. That was concealed carry, and again, it was for protection. Because I think open carrying, it's done with the intent, especially in an environment like that, it's done with the intent to intimidate. And I think there are people that would push back on that and kind of play semantics, but I just think that's bullshit. I think you come dressed for war.
I think it's important, David, to just interject real fast. I don't think the intent matters. I think that the point of that article was that the presence of open carry guns does intimidate. So it doesn't matter whether the person carrying it intends to intimidate anyone, because then you're going to get into some stupid rabbit hole about how, oh, well, I'm just exercising my right and I'm not trying to do anything to anyone. In fact, I'm not trying to say a thing. Like, that doesn't matter. The fact that you have an AR that's loaded, strapped to your chest,
and on your back,
yeah, and that you're making that presence known does have a chilling effect on speech. I felt like that was the point of the Atlantic article, and I thought it was funny that you brought up that they explicitly said that they weren't able to study concealed carry,
right.
but that concealed carry may not have the same effect because it doesn't have the out in front of you, there's a gun, what am I going to do?
Right.
Impact.
Yeah, and they even talked about that. They even caveated that in the article by saying that, if a person was suspicious that others were perhaps concealed carrying, that even that could still have a chilling effect. But that's a salient point and a great segue to talking about what exactly is meant by chilling effect, because I could see this easily dismissed as, well, if you're afraid, if those are your feelings, my gun's just not going to shoot you by itself. What are you afraid of? Neener. Like, I can already hear that in the back of my head from certain conservatives that I know. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah. So I agree.
So explain chilling effect as a legal concept and why that matters and why it's relevant here.
Sure. And I'm sure that Haley is going to...
a couple of barristers here. You guys are both good.
But a chilling effect means that when you take action A, reaction B necessarily happens. And reaction B is something that isn't intended by action A. It can be intended sometimes. But a chilling effect basically means, in this context, if you have some dudes show up to let's say a BLM protest, and they are counter-protesting, and they show up with AR-15s, that there is necessarily, according to this article, going to be less interaction from the protesters, fewer protesters, and less likelihood of anyone willing to get up and say, this is the point of my argument, or I'm here on behalf of BLM. A chilling effect basically just means that something like freedom of speech, which we're supposed to be open to, is lessened because someone else is ostensibly also acting within their own rights.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's coercive to that. Yeah, and again, that's the point. I really just kind of wanted to see hammered out. So thank you for doing that. But yeah, in terms,
just think it discourages.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm generally familiar with the concept of chilling effect. Personally, this is for the people,
Yeah, no, and that's a good word though, discourage, because it doesn't matter what the actor intends. And I think that's important because we don't want to get into these rabbit hole arguments with nutters about whether or not they actually meant by, that St. Louis couple of the attorneys pointing guns at the BLM protesters. It doesn't matter whether they meant to menace the protesters.
Mm-hmm.
The effect was menacing.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're going to discourage. Like, it's a discouragement of people.
It will discourage them regardless of that intent, and that's the chilling effect. It's less speech, and generally speaking, the courts have frowned upon things that will result in a chilling effect on one of the constitutionally enumerated rights.
Gotcha. What can I play the whataboutism game real quick with you and see how you guys respond? To play the devil's advocate or Republican's advocate or whatever. So what if there is a demonstration? And this actually this really happened. There was like a white pride rally, march, or something like that. And I want to say somewhere rural Tennessee, Shelbyville, and I think Lewisburg, and I can't remember where else. It doesn't matter, bumfuck towns, right? And there was like a small number of white supremacists that like got together to do this parade. And then there was a counter protest that was like 5 times the size of it. And were there to basically, as a show of force, and this thing was
counter protest like the local police?
No, it was just like regular people.
Wasn't any kind of government involved?
There was police all over the place to make sure there was nothing happened, and nothing did happen, violence wise. But the group of protesters were so demoralized by basically this overwhelming crowd that was kind of like not exactly bearing down on them, but showing like, kind of coming out in force, basically, not physical force in terms of like interaction with them, but like there's so many more of us than you, like get the fuck out of here kind of thing. And by the time that they made this procession from like one town to the next, there was like 15 people left in the little like Nazi rally, whatever. And they were just like, fuck this, we got to get out of here. And they were done. Now, is that kind of intimidating presence? Because it probably was. Is that considered chilling to their free speech? Like, what's the difference?
No.
Can you explain?
A chilling effect is like you're dealing with like, chilling effect is like having extremely excessive fines and permitting requirements in order to organize a protest. It's something with like legal teeth. That's why they're saying the Second Amendment is starting to infringe on the First. If we're dealing with like legalities, another person, 2 people can express. Say, like whenever you're talking about private individual versus private individual, that's not getting like a chilling effect because of something that the government is doing that's going to discourage people from exercising their First Amendment right to free speech. And here, something that the government is doing is, I would say probably, since this article talked mostly about allowing open carry laws, which I believe are available in something like 44 states now. I mean, it's popular. So, I mean, whenever you have like open carry laws and there is these risks that are associated that people can feel, and, we have the Rittenhouse trials that can show you what can happen.
Right.
And he's going to be arguing self-defense and Second Amendment as a part of his reasoning behind his actions and why it's okay that those guys died, because he was exercising his Second Amendment right and he defended himself or whatever else he's going to say. So no, it's not the same.
Gotcha.
As your
And that's
hypothetical.
and that's a really good point, because and honestly, I would not have thought of that myself as in terms of understanding that it's a difference of whether or not there's some kind of legal provision that's causing the chilling effect, and in this case, it's the open carry laws that basically you can wave guns around pretty much. Not wave, because people will attack semantics, but you know what I mean.
Sure.
To carry your guns openly, in these kinds of environments, and there is a legal provision for that that's causing that to happen. That's having a chilling effect versus just a lawful assembly of people who don't like you being there and are probably shouting things through a megaphone.
That's just that's the First Amendment battle.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, no, I was curious about that, but that's good information for me. So there's one I didn't know. So
Anything to add to that, RJ? Did I?
No, I think that it's a good way of describing chilling effect by saying that it has to have some basis in legality. The courts generally, it's the Nazi salute thing that Ted Cruz brought up for no reason.
Oh God, what a moron!
I missed this. What happened?
Okay, Ted Cruz, when the Senate was interviewing Garland this week, the Attorney General of the United States, pressed him on the idea that if someone at a school board meeting were to do a Nazi rally, that would be protected by the First Amendment. And that's
important to Ted Cruz, I'll bet.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying it's not at issue. Nobody at any point said that someone doing a Nazi salute should be arrested. The Supreme Court has already ruled on that exact. I mean, they've ruled on a literal Nazi rally being protected by the First Amendment.
Sure, it is. Yeah.
And Garland was just like, yeah, that's protected by the First Amendment. But now there are all these clips of Ted Cruz sympathizing with Nazis out there.
Well,
he's like, guy gave a Nazi salute at a meeting. He could do that, And it was like, is this really how you want to go there? Like, oh my God, Ted. Right. It's like, that's not violent. It's not violent.
It's like he thought he was going to corner him somehow, and then Garland was just like, yeah, it's protected. That would be protected.
Yeah, he can salute away.
How dare you oppose Nazis, you fascist?
Right. And in fact, Ted Cruz,
can
show up to a local school board meeting.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, you can do it. Do it right now.
Ahead. Yeah, do it right now. Just say it.
You'll get more votes.
Say it.
Say the 14 words, Ted.
Yeah, say it, Ted. Yeah.
Christ.
Oh, I'll say it with you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Who is that? Was that Steve Harvey?
It was not Steve Harvey. It was a bit though, and it was very good.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. No, I saw. I guess the only thing I even know about that thing with Garland was the literally the TikTok that Haley sent me today. My spiritually being a boomer ass is like trying to learn TikTok and Twitch, which did not work out for me tonight. I was going to live stream this to Twitch, and more technical difficulties. I don't know. It'll take a hard restart. But anyway, so she sent me this TikTok of like, was it like Marsha Blackburn and I can't remember who all else.
Yeah.
They're like, how could you're calling parents domestic terrorism, and he's like, no, I didn't.
Like, no,
it's not what it said. Like, how dare you do that? Why did you? I was like,
you should resign in disgrace.
Yeah, and all those like Holly and I can't remember everybody else. Like, these blowhards, like there is such a thing about the smell test that this rhetoric just does not even begin to pass for me. And I was like, how does this not catch anybody else's, like, get their little skeptic senses, tingling, going, is this really quite what they're saying it is? If it sounds incredibly over the top, just on that score alone. it's that over the top, shouldn't I be
But just
asking
let Ted
questions?
go, and he'll start talking about the Nazi salute, and it's like, and that's all right.
Yeah, you know.
Right. It's like, great point, Ted. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, you win. Nazi salutes. Ted Cruz is in favor of Nazi salutes being totally okay, and they are.
Well, that's the hot take. Is
legally.
Garland says no, he's a fascist for not allowing Nazi salutes, and if he says it's okay, then Garland loves Nazis, right? It's you can't.
By
win.
the way, that's not okay in Europe. Like, you can't do a Nazi salute. In Europe.
Oh yeah, you get like arrested fast.
Yeah.
It happens at football matches all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's wild.
Which should be a good thing.
Right? No, that's the thing.
But like,
I would be in favor of that. However, it's not the law, and that's also fine. But if you're going to try to corner the Attorney General of the United States, who was sitting on the D.C. Circuit for years and was nominated to the Supreme Court, and the only reason he isn't sitting there right now is because McConnell refused to take it up in the Senate. Right. Like, Ted Cruz, I know that you feel that there are Ivy League colleges, and then there are lesser Ivies, and you didn't want to interact with anybody from any of the lesser Ivies while you were at Harvard. But maybe you should think about who you're talking to before you go off and associate yourself with Nazi salutes. It's absurd.
Yeah, it's what you do when you have just no shame whatsoever. And that's what the thing. I truly believe Ted Cruz is not an idiot, that he knows what he's doing, kind of thing.
He's not an idiot. That's the
unfortunate.
That's his brand. It's like,
right. He can't.
It's like Carlson. It's like, are you a white supremacist, or you just play one on TV? Like with him, it's a little bit harder for me to tell. But like Cruz,
with Cruz, he came out, supportive of Donald Trump after Donald Trump called his wife ugly and said that his father was involved with the Bay of Pigs.
That was no, he also insinuated that his father was involved with the Kennedy assassination. Yeah.
He also tweeted a picture of a woman who looked like Ted Cruz and said that he would pay her to do porn. Ted Cruz, I
remember that. And imagine the amount of water this guy has carried for the Trump administration and his base after that. And really, it was the whole thing about insulting his wife and all that stuff. Like, whatever his politics or anything else like that for, like, you lose respect for a person. In that moment, I couldn't imagine doing anything other than knocking him the fuck out for saying something like that. Like, seriously, political career's over, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, probably not, because he's on the right, and violence, the whole thing. But, like, to do anything other than knock him the fuck out or just rebuke him strongly and nastily. But the fact that he did the I am Reek response to all of this after, quieting down and being humbled for a little bit, it's so embarrassing. And that he has any following whatsoever, it boggles the mind entirely. And I used to listen to like the podcast Verdict with Ted Cruz, and I've listened to some of his stuff. It is the most like beyond the pale, like happy horse shit. Like listening to it, and I think that's why I'm more convinced. It's like he's not a stupid guy. He argues in such a way that that he knows better, and he's playing this game of it's just rhetoric. I don't know how people live with themselves, but whatever. Yeah. He's got more money than me. I guess that's how he does it. Yeah. So on that cheery note, do we want to talk about Rittenhouse or predictions of how quickly he'll be released?
I think he's gonna walk.
Yeah.
Not on any legal reason. It's just a gut feeling.
Oh yeah, just simply that.
We lost you, Haji.
Yeah.
He cut out. It was him, not me this time. Woohoo! Haji will come back, I'm sure.
My take on Rittenhouse is I still... Oh, Haji, you back?
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
Yeah. So the judge's first ruling lets you know it's going to be slated in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
If he's going to rule and make suggestions along those lines, it's not just the ruling of saying don't call him a victim, but if you want to use these words to help slew the jury, then that's perfectly okay. Lets you know where the judge stands. So that's where all of those ruling kind of scenarios are going to go.
Yep.
If you can't even call the dead people that were killed victims in
I
a
actually
In a murder
understand.
trial?
in a murder trial, you can't call the people who were shot victims.
So
You
he-
actually normally can't in a criminal trial. You can't use the word victim except in closing normally,
Well,
because you have to prove that the prosecution has to
Right,
prove
right.
that they're
You could say-
victims.
I think
You just have
but
to say
it's
the
more along
deceased or something
the
like
issue
that?
I had was
Yeah.
not that he said you can't call them victims, because I could see him saying you can't call them victims. You could say the person that was shot or this person that was shot,
Deceased.
but to be like,
Yeah.
but instead call them criminal / rioter /
yeah.
thing. Is the part that is the letting me know how the trial is going to go.
Well, he said that they could say that in closing, which to me, so I don't know why he wouldn't be able to say victim in closing. You know, if the prosecution presents evidence that establishes every single material element of a murder, you know, I don't see why they couldn't say victim in closing. That's normally what you could do.
Yeah.
And then saying that, and I mean, yeah, if they brought up evidence that would prove that the guys had set something on fire, sure, you could say that, but I don't understand why I don't understand why those terms came up then, and like why victim was excluded from closing. That's so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
Good.
good point. The idea that victim can't be used within a trial other than closing makes sense, because when you say victim, it immediately implies that someone did something to the victim that was criminal.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they can't use it in closing. I agree with Haley totally on that. I do understand why the defense can use pejorative terms in closing if they have advanced evidence to show that the people at issue did those things. That's fine. I actually think that's a relatively narrow ruling. I don't think that the defense is going to be able to show that any of the actual victims were arsonists or looters or rioters. So I don't think it's actually going to matter in the end. But I do think that it's unfortunate the way that this has been reported, because most people have taken it to mean that Rittenhouse's defense can simply call anyone a rioter, a looter, an arsonist, a criminal, and disparage them
Throughout the trial.
And that the prosecution is handcuffed by not even being able to say something that seems so obvious that these people were victims. And it's a little bit more legally nuanced than that, but you know, that's what we get. So
Gotcha. I guess here's a question. Given sort of the tone that's already been set, say Haley's right, and she usually is, and I disagree with Haley's gut at your own peril is what I've come to learn. But in terms of predictions and things like that, say he walks, does the prosecute what legal maneuver can be done, if any, at that point, by saying, look, this judge was clearly, obviously biased by saying, well, we can call, you know, these people who were killed, and the question was whether or not it was self-defense, it was a murder trial, you know, but it's fine to call them, you know, rioters and looters, you know, without having to establish that fact. It shows overt bias in this case. What can be done at that point? I guess is the question.
That answer is relatively easy. I never saw a transcript, but I don't know that the prosecution objected to that or put an objection on the record. If they didn't, they haven't preserved it for appeal, and therefore there would be no ability to appeal that. If they did, in theory, the prosecution could appeal and say, hey, appellate court, I know we went through this incredibly arduous trial, but at the very beginning, the judge made this one ruling about certain words that could or could not be used, and we feel that that should throw the entire trial out. And at that point, it's kind of unlikely that an appellate court is going to say, yes, that tainted the trial, especially because it's the prosecution appealing. It's much more likely that when a defendant might be biased against, that the state is going to say, you know what, we're the state, we're the ones punishing you, maybe we should go back, try this again, make sure we didn't do anything wrong. So there aren't a lot of recourses for this.
The judge would have to make some pretty egregious ruling that clearly is very prejudicial to the prosecution's case in order to get that. And the prosecution would have to preserve error at trial in order to appeal on those grounds. But also keep in mind, this is a jury trial. So, you know, like how it's going to be framed is like this is an egregious ruling and it materially impacted and swayed how the jury, you know, ruled on whatever issue.
So it's a pretty high bar to pass then, is what you're saying.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's a jury trial. And I would say I have the reason why, like, this is just a complicated case. And I think that because there's going to be shit about the Second Amendment and a bunch of other stuff. I actually don't think it's unreasonable for them to call Rittenhouse to stand. RJ thinks I'm insane for thinking that. I just don't. I mean, he's a kid, and he probably.
No. I didn't say that you were insane.
Wait, explain this.
I said the circumstance would be insane.
No, I don't think it's out of the question. Like, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think there's an absolutely zero possibility that they don't call Rittenhouse to go to the stand. Because if they're actually really trying to prove that these guys were arsonists and looters, one of the main persons to go to prove that is Rittenhouse. Yeah. I saw them doing X, you know, whatever. I don't know if that's that powerful enough to risk putting him on the stand. Plus, he's young and would have to deal with cross-examination, a lot of risks. But I just don't, it's not an absolute zero, and it's normally an absolute zero that you call the defendant to the stand.
But RJ, you think it would be just really stupid to put him on the stand?
It's almost always really stupid to do.
Yeah, it's almost always really, really stupid to do.
Yeah.
So it probably won't happen. I think Haley has a great point here. I think it's a good idea, and I agree with her. It's non-zero. I think that the media situation would be fucking insane. I think that this would be like, oh, it's already insane, but this is going to be a long trial. This is going to be a 4 to 6 week trial, right? This is going to be like OJ level if they say that they're calling Rittenhouse to the stand. Like, you're going to see protests. You're going to see people in the streets during the trial. Because, like, if that happens.
Again, you know, completely out of my wheelhouse. What stops the prosecution from just calling him? Like,
you can't.
Yeah. Oh, you can't. Yeah, fifth. He can just.
He can just plead fifth.
So he has Fifth Amendment.
You can pull a Dave Chappelle and 1, 2, 3, 4.
But he doesn't have.
But also, the prosecution can't do it. Like, he has a Fifth Amendment right, and the prosecution can't do it. He can waive his Fifth Amendment right, but the prosecution can't even say something like, "And by the way, he didn't take the stand. What about that? Fucking pussy." Probably means he's guilty, right? Prosecution can't say that either. Like, you can't.
It's just yeah. It's kind of just too obvious a dig.
The Fifth prevents him from being called by the prosecution.
Gotcha. So, I didn't know that. Yeah. This is good info. This is lawyer time.
Otherwise, in every criminal trial, the prosecution
would call the defendant
and make them sit up there
and fuck with them. Yeah. I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. Or every single trial they would say,
really
he could have gone to the stand and told you what happened, but he didn't. You know,
well, that would be the shortcut, right? Yeah, that's exactly what would happen.
But they can choose to take the stand, and then they're open to cross-examination.
Yeah,
but they can choose to waive their Fifth Amendment right.
Yeah.
If they let Rittenhouse take the stand, I do believe that Haley is again correct that it will be to prove that Kyle Rittenhouse himself witnessed actions that met at least the bare legal definition of arsonist, looter, rioter, whatever, so that they can use those terms in closing.
That does not seem worth it.
Well, no, because
in terms of a
I agree. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think, and my point to Haley was not that I think it would be nuts if it happened, although I think it's unlikely. I think that the media situation surrounding this trial, if Kyle Rittenhouse sits on the stand, will be like bonkers.
Yeah. So the real question is, will he do it not because it's smart for his case, but will he do it for, the media
David,
presence?
Real fast. The reason that it would be nuts is because you can't just take the stand and answer the nice questions that your attorneys are going to ask you.
It's the cross-examination.
And then be like, bye. It's going to be a completely insane cross-examination of this kid.
Wait, I was actually just thinking about that, because isn't there like he's got to open the door though kind of thing, the opening the door, like if they kept it to the limited purpose of that, there is room to wiggle around there. Okay, you saw him do that for how long? Like that's enough door that I can squeeze through to start getting him to talk about some stuff. But isn't there
No, you don't have to worry. You can ask him anything you want.
I know that's the case in civil in certain instances, like the opening the door, you can't go beyond certain things.
Right, no. He could open the door to, so yes, this is a great, very, very weird point. But if he had objected, or if his attorneys had objected to something based on attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
And then on direct, they asked something.
What's on direct mean?
On direct means when his attorney
you're on witness.
Questions.
When the defense is asking questions to the defendant.
Gotcha. Okay.
You're on witness. You have to direct them.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Your friendly witness. When you're asking them questions.
This is for the non-lawyer folks watching, which is probably just me and Haji.
This is just me. Me and RJ are just nerding out about
No, I'm here for it. I love this shit.
Yeah. So on direct, if they were to ask him something that impacted
Did you hear that from your lawyer?
Yeah. That impacted something that was a conversation with or communication with his own lawyers.
I'm asking you about all the conversations with all your lawyers.
Exactly. Then the prosecution can come back and say, hey, I want to ask you a question about that conversation you had with your lawyers. And then the defense will say, objection, you don't get to hear anything. The attorney-client privilege.
He opened the door.
Yeah, he opened the door. He already testified about part of that conversation. We're entitled to hear the whole conversation. He has to testify about that entire conversation. So that's how opening the door works. But if you go on the stand, you can be asked about anything, and you can take the fifth. You can assert privilege through your counsel, but it gets real hairy. I doubt that they'll do it, but I don't think it's a 0%. And if they do, this will be like the talk of the town for weeks.
Yeah.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. What's the timeline on that? I don't actually know.
It starts next week. Oh. The jury selection starts next week.
No doubt.
Jury selection is probably going to take 2 weeks.
Oh my god, jury selection is going to take forever.
Yeah, and then we're going to run into the holidays. So.
Yeah. Wait, but there's that other trial that's going on right now with like Richard Spencer. I have no idea about that case, but they've been going through like loaded potential jurors, right?
I've heard Spencer and I've heard Bannon.
Arbery. Are you talking about the Arbery one?
No, there's like
Arbery is coming up. Arbery is coming up, and that's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, you mean with the stuff that got released by the court on the page of the website?
Yeah, it's going to be. There are lots of things about Arbery.
Yeah. And when's and I think soon SCOTUS. I wish I had the dates in front of me. I don't. SCOTUS is going to be talking about the Texas abortion ban. That's
hearing that
starting
on the
up
first.
Yeah, that's like real soon. That's what, Monday or something.
Yeah,
Well, briefs may be due that day. They're
Yeah.
hearing oral argument next week, though.
So
They
go
said,
ahead.
hey, we're not going to stay this completely blatant violation of the Constitution,
Wildly.
but we're going to, hightail it into a hearing.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Ugh.
It's bad. It's bad.
I have
It's
absolutely
so bad.
zero. This I think Roe's done. If I don't know if this is really going to be the case that does it, but
Yeah, no,
it really does feel like this is starting that process, at least,
This
of
already
saying.
started.
I mean,
No,
it's the whole concept, as I understand and explain it to me. I'm getting this wrong, of like the shadow docket when they didn't grant the injunction basically against that law. Was the 6-week abortion ban, or 6 or 7 week, whatever the hell it was, abortion ban, of saying no, that's fine, we're not going to deal with this now until somebody comes back with like better standing or something like that, like to have an actual case about it. But like just on its face, nah, we're not going to touch it, is like de facto saying we think this law is okay constitutionally. By not granting cert on it.
No. To be fair, that's not what they said.
Okay.
However, effectively, that's what they said.
But this is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, so what
they didn't literally
said,
say it. No.
What they said was they essentially granted the state, because the state passed the law, the ability to sidestep some review of what is otherwise a blatantly unconstitutional provision.
Yeah.
You can't ban abortions at the point where a fetal heartbeat is first detected, because that's 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's way before viability.
Yep.
Casey versus Planned Parenthood established that the test is viability. It's usually 24, 25 weeks. It's obviously unconstitutional. However, the problem is that the people who were challenging the law were attempting to get a restraining order against the enforcement of the law through an incomplete array of people who could enforce the law. And that was by design.
Yeah, because it was the whole like bounty
law.
hunter system or whatever.
Yeah. So normally what you do is you say, hey, you passed a law. Okay, I don't think it's constitutional. I am going to ask for an injunction against any court of this state from enforcing the law. And then an appellate court or the Supreme Court, depending on who's reviewing, can say, you know what? We're going to take a step back. We're going to grant that temporary restraining order until we're able to hear the case on the merits. Because if we let you change the law to the new thing that you passed, some people will get hurt, and there's no way to come back from that. All right? So
Gotcha. But it was because of the goofy manner in which they were trying to enforce it.
Because they allow
by not having any state agency do the enforcement.
Exactly. It's any person.
Private person.
Any private person. So it's not a citizen of Texas. The 2 suits that first were filed were by a disbarred Illinois attorney and somebody from Nebraska. I mean, these are essentially the fight against this wasn't completely thought through.
Not the A team.
And no, it was the A team. It's just that it's hard because this was intentionally designed to evade temporary restraining orders.
Gotcha.
So what the Supreme Court did at first was say, well, we just don't know what to do with this, so we're not going to do anything. And then when it came back from the DOJ, they said, okay, we will hear this in an express manner. And that's what's going to happen next week. The problem with that is that because they didn't stay the law, most of the abortion practitioners in Texas have not been able to operate.
Yeah.
And there are many people in Texas who are, we're talking about something that's been around for 6 or 7 weeks now, we're talking about something where people who wanted to have abortions may age out of their ability to have an abortion under the normal stare decisis law of Casey versus Planned Parenthood, while they're waiting,
of course,
for the Supreme Court to determine that this is an unconstitutional
7 weeks
law.
of people passing that threshold.
Well, yeah, and it's, but they're going to hear it this week. When are they going to rule?
Right.
So you have that problem.
What's the normal lead time?
Problem,
and I imagine they'll fast track it somewhat, but
it doesn't matter. They might
any time.
They could rule next June if they want to.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
You can, but I'm just saying, what's the expectation? Are you saying because there isn't an expectation? Okay, all right.
There is no expectation. They haven't made a promise. All they did was fast track the hearing.
Mm.
Yep.
So the secondary problem here is that in December they're going to hear a Mississippi case, which involves a 15-week abortion law. They're going to shoot down the Texas law. Texas law makes no sense. It's idiotic. If you start allowing essentially a bounty hunting system for individual citizens to enforce the law, then you could do it with anything. You do it with speeding. You could do it with, food temperatures in restaurants. It's moronic. And that's why the people who passed it did it this way. They wanted it to be moronic.
To turn into a quagmire, yeah.
Yeah. So the problem with the Mississippi law is that there is a pretty significant chance, given the makeup of the court, that the court will say, through some convoluted, reasoning, that the Mississippi law is okay. But the Mississippi law is clearly not okay under
Casey,
from Casey versus Planned Parenthood from 1994. And that is in some ways overruling Roe versus Wade, because the current understanding of Roe versus Wade is not full bodily autonomy, and it's not full protect the fetus. It's once the fetus could live outside of it's viability. It's once the fetus could live outside of the mother.
That's where they split the baby.
Yeah, that's right. And if they take it below that, and significantly, but it would be significantly 15 weeks. Nobody thinks that's viable. There's no medical or scientific authority that would say 15 weeks is viable right now. That would simply make a new arbitrary line, and then how can you possibly overrule another arbitrary line? So I see Texas getting shot down, but I see Mississippi as much more problematic in the long term. Texas is still a big problem right now.
Yeah, and I guess that's a little bit more nuanced view than I had been left with currently, just that there's so many, right-wing judicial activists on the court now that they kind of operate off of any pretext to overturn Roe and overturn Casey. So that's same effect in the long run, I'm guessing, but or similar effect, but just but not quite as cut and dry.
You just do the math, right? Yeah. Who's going to vote against the Mississippi law? 3 liberals. Roberts. Okay.
Yeah, probably Roberts. Yeah.
Maybe because he's been on the other side of this.
Yeah, I know
But he's big on stare decisis, which is the precept that once the Supreme Court has ruled on something, it should not rule in opposition to that without a major fundamental change in society or fact. And so, who's your 5th? The 5th is Gorsuch. That's your 5th. And good fucking luck.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely not going to be Kavanaugh.
No.
We already know the makeup of the far right end of the bench.
Yeah, Thomas and Alito, and I can't remember who else.
Right. I mean,
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah. And she's Catholic.
Yeah.
And by Catholic I mean she taught at Notre Dame. She's actually of a sort
Yeah,
of
there's
more
Catholics and then
conservative
there's
sect.
Catholics. Yeah, no, I get
No,
that.
but
Yeah,
she's
my
like
family's Catholic, but they're very liberal. You know,
yeah,
or my
but
dad is
she's
anyway.
even more conservative,
Yeah.
especially on abortion. So it's Gorsuch, and Gorsuch was like, if you freeze to death on the side of the road in your truck, that's a shame because of the contract you signed. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't count on him
not really
coming over
a bastion of
on,
humanism, is he?
well, I just wouldn't count on him coming over on the abortion issue. So.
No, certainly not. Yeah, so it's done. I mean,
Well, it may be. There
what's
are
the
lots
saving
of other,
grace, though? I mean, like, what's really going to happen that's going to alter? It's why I
Well,
pay
there are
attention to
two.
like Americans United stuff and see
Right.
we're going to do this. Oh my guys, we're going to lose every single one of these fights. I don't even want to look anymore. You know, like
Right. There are two saving graces. Okay. One is that a later court can rule differently.
sure.
Okay. And we don't know what the makeup of the court is going to be from day to day. It can change.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you had told me back when Garland was nominated to the Supreme Court that we would end up with a 6-3 conservative liberal split, I wouldn't have believed you, because I wouldn't have expected that the things that happened between now and then would happen. But they did. That can change, in a few heartbeats. The second way is that if the Democrats win, let's say, 2 seats in the Senate in 2022 next year and hold the House, these are not very likely things to happen, but they're not, zero. They're probably a third, like 33%.
Mm-hmm.
They probably will pick up a seat in Pennsylvania. Outside of that, it's a little bit dicey. The House looks like it probably will flip, but it might not. You never know.
That's my understanding. That can happen just through redistricting.
Yeah, it won't happen through redistricting. Actually, right now the Democrats are ahead.
I don't know if will, but
I mean, in Texas, yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but right now the Democrats are actually ahead on redistricting according to the 538 map.
Not in Texas.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't. I'm saying nationwide because it doesn't matter. If you take 10 and I get 15, I'm +5, right?
Right.
So I guess what Democrats, what the left wing has been talking about literally since the 70s is, hey, maybe it's not a great idea to keep abortion rights relegated to, completely court made up ideas. And we should pass a law that just says, here's when you have the right to an abortion. If the House stays blue and the Senate gets to at least 52,
mm-hmm.
so that you can cancel out Cinema and Manchin, you could, in theory, get rid of the filibuster and then pass a law saying, here's what abortion is. And then the court would be very hard pressed to overrule that.
Yeah. It's an interesting way of looking at it. What's the likelihood of we're going to get to 52?
Oh,
Slim and the other side of purgatory.
Well, no, 52 actually, I think 52 is about 50-50. Yeah, 52 is probably about a 50-50. It's a coin flip. The problem is holding the House.
Yeah.
At this point.
And I think the fact that they are inactive on passing anything directly for people and not corporations is going to stop that from being 52.
Yeah, but they can't control
it. Mainly because they are discouraging all of the people who would do the grassroots grassroots pulling that would require that to happen. They're de-inspiring the people who need to be inspired to fight for the stuff that they would need.
That's the other thing that it's kind of been pressing on my mind for the last month or two at least, is like, what's the machine look like right now, to get Democrats elected, in next year and in 24. Like, what does that infrastructure look like? Or what are these people doing anymore? Did they all get exhausted and burnt the fuck out like me and decided to pack it in for a while? Or like, have they still been going strong? What does that look like on the ground? Because I haven't heard a damn thing really.
Yeah, they're still
like,
pouring
for
money.
example,
They're pouring money into that. So the
that's true,
infrastructure
but
is still there.
you've got all the you've got all the push that was done for the whole getting the 2 in Georgia, the push for getting Biden to get things passed, none of which that have actually come through. And thanks to President Manchin and Vice President Sinema, nothing has been able to get passed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about that, Hashi.
Okay,
not
so
not
is
nothing,
there any police
but
reform?
I think
Hold up. For the main topics that were on the election that happened, any
Sure.
police reform?
That's
national
mostly.
level?
No, hold on.
Voting,
But it's
Voting
mostly that's
Rights
mostly
Act?
just hold on.
Voting Rights Act?
Hold on.
Anything
Hold on.
passed?
I'm
No?
answering your first question.
Go ahead.
Your first question is that's mostly locally controlled.
Yeah. That's
Oh,
why
no.
I said it's on a national level.
It is being relegated to locally. It could have been national. It was pushed to be national and just was told and has been left on the burner as in we won't get it done.
Not so much we can't get it done, but what would that look like from a national level?
We can't get it. No. Hold up. If it's not been done, and they have now gotten to the point where even what's his name from New Jersey has said we'll have to come after it again, and that was his main thing. It's
Booker?
gone. Yeah, it's gone. There is
Right,
no,
but
like,
it's not that it's gone. It's that it has to be done from a local level. Like there's only
no.
There's
It
a
is.
limited.
It can be done from the local level, but
No,
it could be done
it
from the
must be
federal
done
level.
from the local level. There's a certain
Education.
amount.
Hold up. Education must be done from the local level. Hey, Brown v. Board of Education. Guess what? It didn't have to be done by the local level. You can put
No, that's
higher
not the
level
same
rules,
thing.
which there already are. There already are federal rules that I, as a peace officer, have to follow. That are federal mandates for how police is supposed to do it. They can still enforce the same amount of humanity provisions that they were attempting to do in the George Floyd Act. And they have decided via Republicans and Vice President Manchin or President Manchin and Vice President Sinema that they're not going to tackle that now.
it does seem
So, for
like
example,
all of the social justice legislation that was being championed largely prior to the 2020 election, it's pretty much just petered out and died. The idea of packing the courts in anticipation for the conversation we just had about Roe and Casey, to stave off the more or less inevitable, at least in the short term, according to RJ. Like it seemed like all those things that we were really hoping. Oh, we lost RJ. I don't think he was pissed off. I think he probably just he's not, because he's the kind of person who would want to respond. But like, and so this isn't piling on so much. But like, I do feel a lot of what Haji's saying is like, my friends on the right are all like, oh, you voted for him. I was like, I said a year and a half before this election that he was going to be a middling president. And this, to Haji's point, is why I think he's a middling president. Not that he's, too far left and that's pissing off my right-wing friends. Like, it's because he didn't really help affect much of any significant thing that got people passionate about. And that's why I think we're going to get our asses reamed next year and possibly in 24, because Biden's still trying to play the nice guy, and he's going to catch the same hell as Obama got in that sense, but probably going to get less done in the meantime. And we've got, that's a weird thing to happen. I'm like stuck on Haji's screen, and it's like this tiny ass little icon.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get back to it.
There we go. I've double clicked on RJ. We're gonna look at his shining face. But yeah, like, I think he's a middling president because I don't think he's gone nearly far enough in an attempt to do the unity healing thing and trying to play nice with it. Charlie Brown trying to play nice with Lucy with the football. That's what I think he's been doing, and that's why I haven't paid really much any attention to him since the election. Just minor things, but yeah, that's That's why I think he's the middling president, to kind of echo Haji's point there again. But
Yeah,
RJ,
and,
you wanted to respond to one of the things he was saying
but
about police reform at the local versus national level before we lost you there.
Oh yeah, I mean it's mostly locally controlled. There are certain things that you can direct from a national level. There are certain investigations that you can run, but at the end of the day, that's not something that is particularly suited to mandate from the federal government.
okay, so qualified immunity, federal or local?
Qualified immunity was court created, so
Yeah.
It's federal. It's a federal.
well, it's not a
provision.
federal rule. It's
No,
created
no.
by
Yes,
the court.
because the court took the trial all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then ruled for qualified immunity. So
Yeah,
it
but
is a
but
federal.
they made it up.
But could you not pass a law just in the same sense? And I am kind of taking Haji's side on this, in the same sense that you were talking about creating legislation saying what abortion is, and hammering that out on a federal level. Could you not do the same thing with qualified immunity? Basically saying this is what qualified immunity is, and by the way, you can't do it. Like, is that not possible?
There's no federal abortion law.
No, I know, and that's what he's saying is that there could have been.
They federally could pass an abortion law. They federally could have passed.
Sure, and they federally can pass a qualified immunity law.
Correct, and that's my point. Is that
that's what
they
I'm
haven't.
saying.
The main provision in the George Floyd Act was to
You
take
just said
away
the federal. You said qualified immunity was a federal law. It's not.
No,
It's court
I
created.
said they can create No, I asked if it was a federal ruling, which it was, a Supreme Court ruling. Federal
think we
ruling.
lost
It's the same
RJ
as Roe
again.
v. Wade. It was a federal ruling that then got passed down to all the states. So the court got taken all the way up, just like Roe v. Wade now takes effect for everybody's state. Qualified immunity argument went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court ruled. Now every state falls under that qualified immunity rule. So if they could have, the main provision in the George Floyd Act was to take a more nuanced version of qualified immunity, not to say no matter what happens, they have no effect. That was one of the main things in that law that could have been written that would have made a massive change in the way policing is done in this country.
RJ said that his internet is totally fucked out, but he's restarting and gonna try one more time. I'm getting tired, so.
Yeah, I think we're kind of wrapping up anyway. I'll give RJ another minute to come back because this seemed like more of a thing between Haji and RJ.
Yeah.
But I
was just trying to. I was just trying to point out how that's not how it works, but whatever. I'm too tired to explain.
Okay.
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying just like you said, they could do a law for Roe v. Wade. They could do a law for qualified immunity.
The legislature.
Yes.
Correct. Which is what the George Floyd Act was a law going again to regulate how qualified immunity would be done, along with a couple of
the
other
interaction here is that we're talking about like the similarities between qualified immunity and what is considered the legal realities of abortion were determined through court cases, not legislation. He's saying we could do some damn legislation.
Constitutional provisions.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Qualified immunity has to fall under one. I don't know. So it would have to be within that framework. And y'all are kind of misunderstanding that. I don't know how to explain it very well, but y'all are misunderstanding and saying it wrong.
No, I understand that it fell under the court policies and under the court rulings because they agreed on how it would be done. Just like the Roe v. Wade, regardless of what part of the part of the laws that they looked at that said this is the way this will be done.
The Constitution.
Yeah, it's. I understand. I think what you're saying, and I think we're maybe talking past each other a little bit at this point, and I don't want to cause frustration in this conversation by just continuing on with the same point. So let's let it go for now, at least until if and when RJ comes back,
steps back in.
so he can step back in and y'all can go at it again.
But yeah, see, so I think that the biggest problem as far as grassroots stuff is the amount of things that were promised and said they would do and were pushed that would happen should the voters, especially in Georgia, give them the Senate, and should the voters elect Biden, the amount of disappointment in what has actually happened on those things that were said they could do is going to result in a lot more a lot of more House seats flipping, not because there's going to be this great Republican surge, but because there's going to be a huge amount of Democrats that aren't going to vote.
Yep.
Not the.
I mean, that's what happens. That's what happens every time.
Yeah, every midterm, I know is a big deal.
I agree.
That's what happens every time that there's a switch in leadership and in the executive, and then followed by the midterm. That's what happens every time.
It happens every time in our system because so many of the people who are elected do not look at needing to change things quickly. They can try, but like there's kind of seems like there's a shit sandwich going on. But I mean, I get it. Apathy happens. Fatigue happens. No.
That's why everyone's like they're throwing all their shit into the bellwether trial in Virginia right now to try to invigorate that crowd because they see that there is apathy and everything. Virginia's is solidly, according to RJ at least, I don't know shit about it, but Virginia's solidly light blue. But why is there?
I think it's more purple than blue. It's gone back and forth. My family's from Virginia. I grew up there. I've seen a lot of back and forth.
Discussion about this, but yeah, I mean, Obama was campaigning there. Biden campaigned there, all for the governor's race that's going on right now.
Yeah, that's big stuff over there.
Because apathy and disappointment is real whenever you're stuck in a gridlock. I mean,
well, and I think the reason why. Personally, it affects my opinion. The reason why it affects Democrats more than it does Republicans is mainly because Democrats are voted in and voted for with the idea of them changing something. Republicans are voted in and voted to stay in under the idea of keeping things the way they are.
To be perfectly honest with you, I did not vote for. I voted for Biden to change it from being Trump. That was really. I didn't have too many more expectations.
we all sat here through the primaries.
I wanted to stop the fucking Trump bleed, and that's where we're at. I'm hoping that some shit gets done in the process.
We all sat through the primaries.
Biden
was nobody in here's first choice.
Could give two craps about Biden before he ran or after he ran, and as I've said before, I've been so annoyed with the whole South Carolina giving him the presidency. But the true fact of the matter is the reason why Republicans don't lose as many houses consistently as Democrats do is because Republicans want everything to stay the same. So if they block everything, then it stays the same.
They have solidarity too. I mean,
that's what I mean.
Stay in
they
lockstep.
They can stay together. We're not going to do anything.
Like
the whole conversations right now are about Manchin and Sinema, not about the other 50 senators that are doing the same thing as Manchin and Sinema.
Yeah, and I feel
that there is not one Republican who's voting for this, even though it's a bill that's wanted by the majority of Americans.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always that, right? But I do find myself torn at the same time of going, when Manchin and Sinema, you guys are, fucking up our only chance for progress, right? And at the same time, I was like, well, didn't we criticize the Republicans for like the lack of ideological diversity or wanting to stand out or have your own opinions and ideas and not necessarily the same values, that they're just a monolith and are kind of unapproachable in that sense? It's something I really don't like about the right at all. But like, to get anything done, Democrats have to be the same way because we don't have the numbers for the diversity of opinion like this. When you have, Manchin, Manchin, I can't remember where Sinema's from, but Manchin being from West Virginia, Arizona, being vulnerable to being, dethroned for going too far over to the other side, and they're looking out for their own interests, or maybe that really just is their values and what they believe and all that stuff. Like,
they're apparently in lockstep with their voter base, like Sinema in Arizona.
Manchin for sure is, and Manchin has never been anything different than what he is.
Yeah.
The bigger perfect example of how corporate influence happens in Congress is to simply take a look at the campaign she ran to become a House of Representative and what she thought needed to happen, and it is diametrically opposed to what she is saying now.
Yeah.
Which is why it's one of those. She is a perfect example of she's not in it for.
She's a political animal, sure.
Yeah, she's like, this is where my donor money comes from. This is why I'm going to do that now. I was opposed to it before I had donor money, but now that I have donor money, this is what I do.
Yeah. No, I understand
Her biggest complaint and the biggest argument I have with her that I don't understand anybody who defends her on is the whole Medicare prescription argument. She was vehemently opposed to the provision in the bill that would allow Medicare to haggle for prices from the pharmaceutical companies. She's opposed to Medicare being able to do that.
Yeah, that sounds like someone's paying her a lot of money.
You're like, so how exactly is that for anybody other than the pharmaceutical companies? Like this. Yeah. Say again.
Yeah, I was doing the hand signals. I don't know if you guys remember the hand signals, but yeah. So Haji, to your point, I hear you. Yeah, I try to check my own cynicism, but I find it being too often confirmed. Was that a jug of apple cider you just drank from? I want apple cider so bad right now. That looked delicious. But I'm going to call it here. I'm guessing
we
RJ's...
have a local orchard that makes their apple cider too, so we can actually
at the orchard. I got to go to bed soon.
I'm calling it here. Guys, this was fun. Thankfully, it wasn't me with tech issues tonight. So I'll be able to keep doing these things. Yeah, RJ kind of crapped out. That's not good. I'll have to keep our conversation short. So expect more of this stuff coming, guys. If you're watching this, if you see the link, follow us on fucking YouTube, right? Like the channel, because I know there's not a lot of popularity there because I haven't used it really in the last 2 years and, never really interacted that much. I'm trying to kind of move platforms a little bit, or at least branch out. We will eventually be on Twitter, not Twitter. We are on Twitter, but on, Twitch and Discord. I know I'm such a damn boomer. Just trying to say, what are the kids doing these days? Is it the talk? Is it the talk ticks? The talk ticks. I was like, it reminds me of my parents when I got the original Nintendo. They kept calling it the Nintendo, and I was like, it's not. It starts with an N. There's an N in it. But yeah, I'm my parents now. But guys, this was fun. It was good seeing y'all. Haji, hang in there, by the way.
I got so sleepy.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Haley, and it's good seeing you. Good talking to you. Yeah, and we'll keep the conversation going, guys.
Love you, miss you guys.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Kind of glad you're back, Haley.
Thanks.
You guys take care.
Bye.